books they call it a filter for the deep, but the truth lies hidden in silence they create. They promised us safety, clean waters and clear, but the tide it brings whispers, there's more to fear. False waters, running cold and clear, but beneath the surface, danger draws near. Tainted tide, they say it's clean, but the poison flows unseen, unseen. They built an ice wall, said it would hold, but the cracks appeared and the lies grew bold. Now they release what they cannot contain. For 30 long years they'll play this game. False waters, running cold and clear, but beneath the surface, danger draws near.
Hello everybody.
They say it's clean, but the poison flows unseen, unseen.
Always takes me a minute. Hope you're doing well. That song, you'll find it at James Lewis's site on YouTube. He built the Alps water system unfiltered. That's hilarious. Because you know how a lot of musicians will like do just acoustic guitar unfiltered on a, they'll just record it raw. That's hilarious. I needed a chuckle. Yeah, here we go again. I know I'm late. I apologize for that. I had to use every extension cord I got to make this work tonight. I blew out 220 system, I guess. I pulled the breaker, the circuit breakers, and went down. I thought that was what was wrong, but they said it was outside, right? Damage. Got to bring in the electricians to fix that one. I didn't think I was doing a show anyway. But I said I'll get everything ready, just in case I'm up to it. I was up to it. It's just don't want to look like a sad sack when you're doing it, right? Second debris removal trial starts at Fukushima plant. That's the headlines everywhere today. It's everywhere. It's like, Oh, we got a poll too, don't we? A rather important poll. Should TEPCO and UNs and any other subsidies like ERPA, Nuclear, and the ICRP, etc., and the International Atomic Energy Agency be removed from Fukushima's entire site? From all the offices, from any mentioning of Fukushima whatsoever, on top of that, permanently. That's what we need. Minimum. Is we need these creatures, and by rights prosecuted to the fullest extent of laws. The second removal comes after TEPCO. So normally that poll will get spammed crazy before the show is over. The second removal comes after TEPCO completed the first trial removal operation using specially developed extendable device. It's a set of tongs, right? This is absurd. They spent $40 million. $40 million building. It's like a fishing rod. And at the end of it, it has this, like a fishing rod. This is an actual set of tongs. And they brought back, it took them 4 years to build this spend their $40 million, I should say, and working with the British, so what else is new? And he brought up a sample of the fuel. This is the cover story, right? But as you watch this, you'll really appreciate why they're doing it. And you can see in between the tongue, there's this little tiny sliver. Now, the first time we covered it extensively for several days, making fun of them and everything else, showing the documentation, they brought up the equivalent of a grain of rice. Everybody said it was a grain of rice. The International Atomic Energy Agency, TEPCO, you name it, they all said it. World Nuclear News, everybody said it was the size of a grain of rice. And remember that statement for later. It weighed 0.7 grams, equivalent, now they're saying, to one raisin. Now, they never used the word raisin the last time. It was always equal to a grain of rice. And a grain of rice is significantly smaller than a itty-bitty tiny raisin. And I think they should be put in jail and fed one raisin a day in dirty water. So $40 million to build a contraption is meant to cover up what's happening. Now, once they put that thing near the reactor meltdown debris that's left over, because there was 36 reactor cores, and there was 8 reactor cores at the top of each of the 4 buildings. There's 32 reactors. And the fuel pools, they're gone. And you see that person standing there. Well, once the top of that would go and say, if it did really, truly, absolutely, it didn't, but if it did go near the reactor core, then you could never stand up there again, and you could never get near the tip of it again. And then when they transferred it to Tokyo, they done it all secretly. They had special vehicles and police and unmarked cars and helicopters and the Navy, and they had satellites tracking it. It was the size of a grain of rice. That's the cover story, right? You'll see. You'll understand if you're not familiar with the story. Every time I see it, I'm humiliated. The nuclear industry must be rather humiliated every time they see that. Where did he come up with these cover stories, I wonder? And was delivered to a research laboratory near Tokyo. So the question is there a better way, if they were actually going to do this, right? Like, it's easy to get their grain, rice-sized debris in Tokyo. They don't have to go all the way to Fukushima to get it. This stuff traveled all the way to Tokyo. Let me do this again. So, I was thinking, and the last time they came out with this propaganda piece, I said the same thing. Does it seem sensible to use that, or could you save $40 million and just use a vacuum cleaner on a crane, give it a power source, drop it down with a very long hose, with a 50-foot hose, and now you got a whole bunch of samples. I'm sure you got big enough piece, you don't have to go back and do it the second time for a whole bunch of money. That makes sense? Huh? Because that doesn't work for a cover story, see? That works. Oh my God, look, honey, it's a $40 million robot. That's a robot, Dana. Yeah. Your toothbrush is a friggin' robot. And it goes, it's incredible. Like, it took all the best brains on the entire planet to come up with this idea. The best Harvard and Yale University and Stanford and Oxford University, MIT and Berkeley University, the best minds on the planet all got together and said, let's use a tongue to get our sample so we can save the world. I'm pretty sure a vacuum cleaner would do a much better job. You wouldn't have to go back 2, 3, 4, 10 times more. But the problem is, they say tree. Back here we call it tree, but everybody else calls it three. Three of the Fukushima Daiichi 6 reactors went into meltdown. That's the most prominence it'll ever get in any statement in any media you're going to read. Hey, I had a meltdown, and they got a tongue. Now they're going to fix everything. So when you look at reactor 4, because that's the one they're not counting out of the 4 reactors. Say you're a novice, you don't know nothing and everything else. Would you think that just maybe, perhaps, I don't know, this is probably a stretch, that the fuel pools are gone and the reactor core, some 9 reactor cores that were in the fuel pools are all gone? Doesn't that qualify rather, as a meltdown? Because I can assure you it does. And the stump you're seeing, the only reason I left that there was to manipulate you later. And you'll see that coming up in a moment. Went into meltdown. Meltdown. All hail meltdown. People are building shrines to meltdown worldwide now after reading those articles. That's Medusa, Reactor 3. They're all Medusas, but Reactor 3 is a little bit special. It was a plutonium X oxide reactor. And so did they really have to go in the reactor to get a piece of debris? Didn't they already have access to it? Because like in the video, you'll see the fuel pools with 9 reactor cores and the reactor itself falling back down to Earth. But did they really need to go inside of a reactor with a tongue? Literally, well, you can count on the nuclear to do the stupidest thing imaginable, the most idiotic cover story imaginable. That's what they do. I don't know why they do it. I guess because they're stupid, right? They could have got their sample here. A reactor is a reactor is a reactor, right? Per se. But like their story is they need to find the reactor core so they can figure out how to extract. I'm going to say that part because that's coming up in a moment here. Robots last month began moving sandbags, and this was an important. So the idea of coming up with the story today about the robot going in is so they can use this story again, but in a context of a sentence, right? No audio? Oh shit. Who? Did I have no audio the whole time? How long ago did I lose the audio? I see it's working there now. Hi everybody. Well, that's disappointing. How long ago did the audio shut off? Hello? Hello? Anybody hear me? Just a minute or two? Thanks, James. Well, that's good. I'm glad you text me. Thank you. Let me just step back for a minute. Right back to here. 3 of Fukushima's reactors melted down, but they didn't count reactor 4. You probably got that much, I would imagine, because I got a tendency to ramble, not ramble, but expand, extrapolate and expand. Went in the meltdown. You probably heard that part. NTV Japan, because there's a 15-second delay. Thank you, everybody. My apologies. So the robots began removing sandbags of force heavers, but most likely what they done was they cemented it, they put steel plates on that. This is what they done at Hanford, at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, at the MIAC, everywhere else, when they have high levels of radiation. And so these bags were sitting there for 14 years, soaking up curium and uranium, plutonium, americium. They only acknowledged 4.4 sievers, but we know it's infinitely, nightmarishly worse than that. There's no way to clean it up, and robots won't last that much energy. Thanks, Dana, Robert, James, Albert. Hi, everybody. Japan in 2023 began releasing to the Pacific some of the 540 Olympic swimming pools of treated wastewater. This was August the 24th, 2023 video. I downloaded from TEPCO's website, who should be banned from all nuclear after what they got done. But I mean, the blame should squarely go to the International Atomic Energy Agency and the nuclear industry in a whole. That's who you should really have no tolerance for whatsoever, is these entities, these creatures, these cowards that hide behind each of their tailcoats. This video is taking a sample. They're taking the first sample of the treated water released at Fukushima. I just put this there for yucks. So let me play that. That's a little sampling station where this is the first sample, and they're so sure of themselves they're using a little. The whole story's ridiculous. The whole industry is lunatics, eh? That's the first video. It's up at their website, and I got another one of them coming up. The second sample they ever took there. So that one was on the when they started the new fable that nothing melted down. There was only 2.5 grams or something of tritium, was equal to 3 grams of sugar being dumped in the ocean. Of everything in the 1,000 tanks, they said. That was a South Korean professor of nuclear and quantum engineering, no less. The industry is insane, eh? Now, that particular story was from the South Korean Muppets that were out there protesting tritium, which were most likely hired by the industry to do it, which had been endorsed by the International Atomic Energy Agency. Oh, wow. So, they're the architect of almost all the media stories on top of that. Yeah, drink it. Hi, everybody. Here we go. Second debris removal trial starts at Fukushima plant. Yeah, and both of my fridges are connected to the 220 volt system. And so when that happened last night, right after the show too, that's when I lost everything. I had to go out and dig out the long extension cords because the shed where the other freezer's quite a long ways away, right? And ran power out to that one, thank goodness. I'm hoping that we're going to resolve this tomorrow, but we'll see. Second debris removal, and that means I got no hot water, I can't use the stove. It doesn't matter, I'm sleeping all day, every day. That's when your body recovers, when you're sleeping, right? Second debris removal trial starts at Fukushima Plant, Taiwan. Is that Taiwan story? Yeah, Taipei Times. They're so disgusting, eh? We've covered them when there's a huge pro-nuclear in Taiwan, and they're not even from Taiwan, the Taipei Times. And they were going to have a referendum. Was it 2018 or something? And I covered it for 6 days or something straight. They were having a referendum on, because the pro-nuclear community went on a hunger strike and all kinds of stuff to get it on a ballot, on a referendum, rather. At the same time as there was an election or something going on. Am I right in saying that? I can't remember anymore. It's 2018. And 74% of the population of Taiwan voted not to take food from the nuclear wasteland. But that was only binding for 2 years. Wrap your mind around that statement. And so 2 years later, there was no more referendums. The new president, the new administration of Taiwan went ahead and signed a agreement with Japan to import food from the nuclear wasteland. It's a betrayal. That's all the government, these scumbags are doing to us. They're not worth having. They're really not. Robot starts a second mission to retrieve debris. This is nuclear meltdowns, folks, not debris. At the ruined. This is not ruined. These are nuclear meltdowns. Did I mention that? It's really a... So this is a model of the radioactive fallout after 23 days. That model of cesium-137 covering the entire planet at 1 million to 10 million times pre-Fukushima cesium-137. And this was a story we done on Iran, was that if you blow up Iran's reactors and nuclear facilities, will the plume cover the planet, the entire planet, in 23 days? And yes, all the models of all the Fukushima shows how it really works. And it's the only element that it makes the plume that symmetrically covers the entire planet is radioactive fallout. Carbon doesn't do anything like that. Wherever it lands, it grows trees and plants and insects and birds and mammals and humans and animals and puppies. And a remote control robot, like, it's such a stretch to call it a robot. Just got to keep my eye on the conversation just in case my audio goes on me again. I think I'd done it that time, personally. I can't remember what happened. Was I playing with buttons? Who knows? Because my equalizer got two sides. And so my south side is where I got everything set as the audio on my left side, right? And so then I can always just look over there to figure out how the settings should look, which is wonderful, right? It's a wonderful idea. A tong to grip tiny nuggets of radioactive debris. This is nuclear reactor core. This is melted reactor core, not radioactive debris. Well, it is, I guess, radioactive debris because the reactor cores are all gone. Let me point out some of that madness very quick. Let me show you all 4 reactors just for yucks. Let me go back to this story, this part of the story. Let me just show you reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4 because that's reactor 1. Reactor 2, reactor 3 is the one you can see the smoke rising out of. And behind it is reactor 4. That picture was taken March the 15th. And each of the buildings, reactor buildings, had 9 reactor cores. It's according to Frank von Hippel and many others. So reactor 1 detonated. Reactor 2 burnt constantly for days at enormous temperatures. That one went China syndrome. Reactor 1 ejected its reactor core, or its fuel pools, and the reactor core, we believe, went China syndrome and parts of the fuel pool. Because they'll burn, once they ignites, they don't need oxygen to burn. Once they ignite, they'll hit 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. There's nothing the building has that can contain it. I might have done that earlier and then never turned the volume back on. That's probably what happened, right? I kind of remember doing that. Maybe that's what happened. Because you can only be so disciplined, right? And when you're not feeling the best, then let's keep going. So the reactor 3 ejected his reactor core and the fuel pools right out of the buildings. Reactor 4, the industry decided to cover them. That's why they tell you 3 reactors, 1, 2, and 3. But they don't mention reactor 4 for some reason. Right, so they love chipping away at numbers. Like the evacuation numbers were over 500,000 originally, and they kept chipping away at it, and eventually now they're saying there's only 140,000 people ever evacuated. And they do that with all the numbers, with the amount of fuel in the fuel pool. They say it's like less than 900 tons. When it's 2.5 ton, 2,000 tons or something are in the fuel pools. Just a single fuel pool. I got that coming up for you. So what they done was they built this contraption off-site, assembled it on-site with remote control cranes and some homeless people in paper suits. They would have died. All of these people that worked there would have died. We got one story where they acknowledged at least 800 dead people, and these were homeless and destitute people, or victims of society, right? There's no nuclear scientists working there. The cranes are all remote. And so here was the whole plan, right? You can see the top, and they brought in the contraption in the middle one, and then the top one there, and over. Then they start putting panels on it, individual panels on an empty contraption, right? And so you can see this part of the building's missing too. But when you look at this footage, you can see the guts are hanging out of it. Everything is pulverized, right? There really isn't anything left. But that didn't stop a good scam. So then they rolled out this picture. And like when you see these explosions, think about the top of those buildings. And ask yourself, what part of that building, what part of that roof rather, can make that kind of massive, it covered the whole site, which meant you couldn't get back on the site. That was the fuel pool that blew up. That's what caused that dramatic plumes. And reactor 3, as you've seen already, dramatic, right? Okay, back here. They all got this picture to work with. That's the new picture that they're released to the public, and all the media ran out with it. Boop, boop, boop. All of them sounds exactly. A tongue to grip tiny nuggets of radioactive debris. Entered the number 2 reactor primary containment vessel Tuesday. This time, the company aims to send the robot further into the containment vessel to get samples from an area closer to the center where more melted fuel is believed to have fallen. They don't need that, right? Obviously, they have access to lots of the material because it was ejected right out of their buildings. You know, and not just and then you got reactor 2, one, and you got reactor 4. You have access to material. You don't need a stupid contraption. You don't need a contraption, right? A fishing rod style. Not even a fishing style rod, but a fishing rod style. A camera. So they modified it, and turns out the modification was they allegedly put a camera on it. These are the strangest creatures we've ever come across. There is no other subject out there. No specialized subject where you got this many chicken necks. All the chicken necks in university, they got degree after degree after degree, but didn't have the brains to go look for a job or anything. Nuclear industry goes through all the universities. They're embedded with all the universities since the 50s, right, because of the Secrecy Act, looking for subversive and useful idiots. With at least 880 tons of melted nuclear fuel that is mixed with the broken parts of the internal structure. Now, they're talking about all 4 reactor buildings when they're talking about that number, but they're only acknowledging 3. Well, clearly, reactor 3 doesn't have those attributes left in them, because that's quite the detonation right there. But if we go and look at the actual inventories known to be in each of the reactors, each one is 3,450 assemblies. Don't when they call it spent, it's used, but it's only 3% spent, right? 97% of its toxicity is still there. And this stuff is splitting atoms 24 hours a day and released directly into your environment. So you have 3,450 assemblies. Each assembly is 100 fuel rods. They're 12 foot long and 18 pounds each. So you got 1,800 pounds as an assembly, which is 6,200,000 pounds of fuel, right? Divided by 2,200 is 2,822 tons in just a single reactor building. An awful lot of work for a set of tongs. And they got to go. Tongs got to reach all the way down to China because it's got China syndrome. Why don't you just use a vacuum? You just stick the big pipe in, the hydraulic pipe, pneumatic driven pipe, and dangles the hose, and the hose goes down, and it just because vacuum cleaners actually work, right? They work. They don't cost $40 million. You can get them for a decent wet and dry vac for like $69 at Jang Wang Gong. And we used to use a system on the ocean for vacuuming, and it was just like a big hose, because it's water. Then you would just put air blowing back up to the surface, and as the air is rising to the surface, it expands, and it just creates this vacuum. And then we always keep it boosted, but it basically would run on its own if you had something stable, right? And so they can do that with a sophisticated, just an air, I know someone might have to develop it, but they should develop this thing that's called an air hose, and call it an air hose, where it just creates a vacuum. We'll have to invent a vacuum too, right? Because the smartest people on the planet can't seem to come up with that concept. So how come they couldn't get their their rice-sized grain of debris from one of these Medusas? I don't know. And they got Fukushima engineers who made a tongue. How's work, honey? Oh, well, we got some difficult work ahead of us, darling. And the kids, my daddy's a nuclear engineer. And a few years down the road, they're going to realize their dad's an idiot. Fukushima engineers launch a second attempt to remove radioactive debris. So when you see that, it's pretty dramatic, isn't it? But the last time I got it, was a piece the size of a grain of rice. Now they're calling it a grain. They took a lot of ridicule, I would imagine. So now they're saying it's a grain is equal to a raisin, because you took so much ridicule for using that. When I use a contraption, just blast up a whole bunch, and you can send in a half dozen homeless. When the first one dies, the next one runs in, picks up the little raisin piece, and runs with it. He dies, the next homeless guy runs over and picks it up. But like the dramatic headline, most people are not going to read the story, and if they do, they won't even comprehend it. The enormity of the lie because it's so stupid. That's what I got to start doing, stupid stuff. If I do stupid stuff, I have like 1 million people here yucking it up in the comment section right now. The comment section, the idea, and I was going to close it down many times years ago because the trolls were torture. But I resisted it because, and that's what they were trying to do, get me to close it down. Because I always felt that people should be able to come here and ask an honest question. Like an honest question. And get a reply from people that are knowledgeable there, right? A lot of, typical person in my comment section is pretty darn knowledgeable. You're not going to hoodwink them with bananas or raisins or grains of rice, I can tell you that much. Unfortunately, that's not true for the rest of the population on the planet. Fukushima engineers, every time I see that, I just... Y'all got your blue socks on? Let's roll. Have any of them got both of their feet? Because we got pictures where they actually got both of their feet flat on the ground, stood in front of these tanks like they're walking. You can't walk. Try walking around. Get up and try walking around with both of your feet flat on the ground. Tell me how that works. These are most likely homeless and destitute and victims of society. Their first day on the job, you got to go talk to the guy with all the tattoos, right? The catastrophic remains one of the worst nuclear accidents in history. What do you mean one of the worst? 4 reactors is not the worst? How is that possible? Each of them were pure uranium, pure plutonium. Each of them had 8 reactor cores at least in the fuel pools. They're all gone. 36 reactor cores is gone. Oh, it's just one of the worst. What did they call it? Nuclear. It's not a nuclear accident. It covered the whole planet. This model is 20 days. Maybe. 20 days of just plutonium-239. Serious stuff we're talking about. Locally in Japan, the entire country per 100,000 children, 14.2%, 14,200 children need open heart surgery when they're born because of complex congenital heart diseases. It's the correct congenital malformation, basically. Tokyo Electric Power Company, which should be banned from the site. The International Atomic Energy Agency, unequivocally, without exceptions, should be banned from the site. And usually that poll that we're doing, normally I'm spammed like crazy right now. That's what normally happens, right? They spam me. I have an example of that coming up here. Hang on. Is China Dtarts assertions that no radiation was found after Fukushima Nuclear Plant idiotic and sadistic? And the spammers showed up and voted 52% that it wasn't. That was desperation. And we know it was desperation. It was a single person. Because when the show was over, and there was a 2-hour, 5-minute show on top of that. I've been doing it for over a decade, but I managed to eke out 32 views. But I had 36 votes on the poll. And so they got a tendency not to hide their desperation. They're trying to influence a single individual, I would imagine, that they're looking at everybody's IP addresses that come to my site. The nuclear industry got 1,000 public relation firms to take a joint shit on people like me, right? And it's pretty boring because they don't really have a lot of people to beat the shit out of. And so I've taken the brunt of it. Any new weapons they got. I'm considered a possibility for experiments with. They're a terrible industry. They have access to all kinds of nasty stuff. Their job is to shut down any dissenting voices. And particularly when they got a cover story, to shut down the truth. That's why you see 14 people on my show, 15. With 10 votes. I'm surprised they let me have 10 votes, actually. They basically are erasing me, but I refuse to go away. Because I don't have a right to. Neither do you, right? Describing it as part of a carefully staged... a carefully staged... The hard cases, aren't they? And you see the picture. Watch this. They show you this picture. Like the theory is what they're showing you is high level waste, and you got all these people in their paper suits, and they're going to put the high radioactive water in containers, right? That's what the depiction is. But if this is high level waste, you can't go near the hoses. And you're going to put, this is not going to be a high pressure hose going into a barrel, okay? It's not. Because it's at a nuclear. The whole thing is just, that's probably, they made the picture themselves on AI. But they're trying to evoke respect or something for the nuclear industry in general. That's one of their key things. The nuclear industry, the International Atomic Energy Agency wrote every one of these stories and gave it to Abdullah and everybody else and they put their name on and got a kickback. They think they want people to see him, because years ago people used to see him as special, right? And they weren't. They were scumbags. They always have been, see? But now they can't hide the fact they're a scumbag anymore to themselves or to the mirrors when they look in it. So, like the headline of this story, Fukushima engineers launch a second attempt to remove radioactive debris. And this is most likely a ChatGPT picture made with artificial intelligence, too. The first trial carried out in November, because there is no stoic nuclear engineers at Fukushima wandering around in their paper suits, okay? It's just never going to happen. The first trial carried out in November saw engineers successfully extract a minuscule... It must have taken a long time to frame that particular sentence. A minuscule sample of the melted fuel debris weighing in just 0.7 grams, roughly the size of a raisin, carried out in November. Roughly the size of a raisin. No, raisin was never mentioned. It was never mentioned. It was the size of a grain of rice. And we mocked the living shit out of that for the next 2 weeks on top of that. So, honey, how did it go? We got some nuclear debris in. Oh, yeah. How big of a piece was it, honey? Well, it was pretty big. Well, I'm not allowed to tell you, honey. It's classified. Half of them cried themselves to sleep that night because I was making fun of them. Dana's picking on me again. Michio Kaku, a famous physicist from the United States. Human civilization may destroy itself. I mean, look at Fukushima. Liquefaction of 3 nuclear reactor cores. Nothing better than the old time machine, isn't it? Isn't that time machine wonderful? So apparently a grain of rice may destroy the planet if it's nuclear. First time any core ever liquefied is still out of control. That was 2013. And the disaster could start all over again. It never ends. It's radioactive fallout. It never goes away. You can't destroy it. I mean, extract the plutonium mixed oxide fuel. They're boiling in citric acid at 3,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures or something. they burn it in incinerators, and the ashes are so radioactive you can't get rid of. So 9/10 of the radiation would have been liberated back into the environment. I mean, there's no other industry out there that screams Nuremberg trials like this industry does. Since the first trial, the company has enhanced its extraction equipment. Enhanced. It's so humiliating. The stoic nuclear industry. How can they ever look each other in the face and beyond me? They upgraded the extendable device. Okay, that's cool. You spent $40 million on that one? Yeah. So since the first trial, the company has enhanced, beefed up maybe, or got some new magic technology, Dana. Has enhanced the extraction equipment, because the nuclear industry is pretty clever, Dana. They upgraded the extendable device, which cost $40 million, with a new camera, for better precision and monitoring. Cameras don't work at a nuclear meltdown. Anybody ever told these freaking whoever wrote it never seen a nuclear reactor in their life. Has nothing to do with the nuclear industry. They probably got ChatGPT to write the story on top of that. So the best you can do after nuclear 36 reactors melt down is get a grain of rice. Does that give you confidence? Does that make you go like, wow, the nuclear industry? I got to grow up and work in the nuclear industry. That's crazy stuff. These people are geniuses. How much would they got taken up if they used a vacuum cleaner before it finally died? Rather than that thing, whatever that is. That's $40 million, Dana. You take that back. You know it's $40 million because the British worked on it too. You don't get much more corrupt or sadistic than those people. Japan resumes test removal of fuel debris at the Fukushima Nuclear Plant. 880 tons. It was over 2,000 tons at the top of each of the buildings in the fuel pool. Where'd that go, I wonder? Right, they keep chipping away at every number for 14 years. Now they're down to 880 tons instead of 8,000 plus tons. That's the nuclear industry. Okay, so this picture is about they're dismantling the tanks. Now the tanks were full of high-level radioactive sludge and water that was used to run over the melted reactor core. It was pumped up at different wells. So they drilled a bunch of wells around the site, allegedly hundreds, and they got pumps on it. These pumps won't work with that high level. They'll break down right away, by the way. But let's say they're true. And so they're pumping up the water from hundreds of wells around the site to stop it from going in the ocean, because clearly that works not. You would need a line of pumps every 2 feet across the entire site to even try to put a dent into it. Which suffered core meltdowns. And so these tanks allegedly had high-level waste. They didn't have no ALPS or Revas or Siri system or Curie systems or anything like that for filtration. 2015, they allegedly completed the ALPS system. They didn't even start until 2013. Rupert Winfield Hayes says in 2013, we played that video just last week, that the tanks were all full from the aquifers under the plant itself. Because they were fumbling along with the cover-up story at that point. And so we got a lot of really good tidbits to work with and eliminate. And that would be 1.4 million sieverts of just, because the beta they acknowledge at 2.2 sieverts per liter. And these tanks are over 300,000 gallons. But anyway, it works at the 1.4 million sieverts. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. 10 sieverts, walking past it, your organs melt, and that's the end of you. That day, you'll die somewhere. If you stay there for a few minutes. But at 1.4 million sieverts, you can't walk past a tank. And you can't build another tank anywhere within a quarter mile, that's for sure. Maybe it's like the school in Koriyama where the tanks were filled up with water to shield people in the lunchroom. Because that actually makes sense when you consider all the other lies they've told you. I'm surprised I never came up with that one. So now they're emptying the tanks. It's filtered allegedly, which simply is not true. You can go into my playlist and watch videos dedicated to the tanks with all the documentation you could ever dream of. You can take it all and make documentaries with it. So once let's say it was real, and they drained the tanks finally, and they got all the sludge out of the bottom of it. That tank, if you took a square foot at the top of the tank to a subway station, it'll be so radioactive. And if you put it in the wall, everybody walk past that every day for 1 million years will drop dead. That's how radioactive from their organs melting. And we're supposed to believe that they got people on top of the tank. Not only that, they're dismantling the tank in paper suits. Do you get any idea how ludicrous, how bizarre that is when you try to use science to justify? You can't use science to justify any of this. They need to be removed from the site. These are the worst humans conceivable. Like the tank, if you empty the tank successfully, and you got all the sludge out of it, which is at hundreds of billions of atoms per cubic centimeter, lethal doses just running past the tank. If it's empty after being filled with the stuff, because the tank would be emitting it, so much radiation, shine, and neutron bombardments, and beta rays, and alpha, and gammas, X-rays. Simply not true, right? The tanks were empty, were never filled. They might have been filled with water because a few years ago there was a huge earthquake right there, because, they're on the tectonic plates, the stupidest place imaginable to build a reactor and put the fuel pools at the top of the building. Literally the stupidest, the most moronic spots you can put a reactor would be right there, with a 3,000-year legacy of tsunamis and 40 miles away from the tectonic plates, which is literally on the tectonic plates, right? But anyway, they had about 50 tanks to shift it. And so I always assumed after that they were empty, obviously, right? And that they would have filled it up with water so they didn't get embarrassed again by that. And all the tanks are connected. Like, you can't go near hoses. The whole story is so hokey, so full of holes. In an actual debate, there's nothing there that is substantial for their arguments. TEPCO, which shouldn't exist, has no right to exist. They're not a decommissioning authority. Nothing about this, and they're an operator. They're suits, right? TEPCO, not all people wearing suits, of course, are not. I don't put everybody in that category. I'm just saying these people in particular are in that particular category. TEPCO plans to follow a similar method as the first test. The $40 million to get a grain the size of a grain of rice. And the idea is to lull people, like they did with the tritium, into this hypnotic state where they're watching the king cobra, and the cobra can attack anytime it wants because they're intoxicated by something that it's like to cast a spell on you, right? We got $40 million and we got to size out the grain. It was a great day. We got to size out the size of a grain of rice. That was impressive, believe it or not. No, honest, it's impressive. My apologies, because I'm a bit of a... This accumulated at the bottom. Several grams of debris. Collect several grams. That's the only story, by the way, that mentions that or frames it that way. before they put the contraptions over these buildings to hide them and pretend that they were getting the fuel out of the pools, clearly they got, 7,000 of these tanks, these containers full of sludge, allegedly, right? And they could have got samples from any of them if they wanted it, right? Because they were all collected. Allegedly. Like, this industry is insane. They built 18 incinerators in the prefecture just to burn radioactive debris. These are like 9-story buildings. And now the problem is they don't know how to decommission the incinerators because they're so radioactive. They also have a huge all nuclear plants always got incinerators on the site where they burn a legal amount of radiation every single day, all day. It's an industry obsessed with destroying every species. And they've fulfilled their fantasy. Now they just got to keep everybody on their heels while they finish the job. A robot starts the second mission to retrieve debris at the ruined Fukushima Nuclear Plant. And so if you don't know this story, you're not familiar with this subject, and you know a little tiny bit or nothing, this is quite a dramatic headline. Way to go, dear scumbag IAEA. Good job. A remote control robot. And I got a picture of it. It's pretty amazing. I mean, it's amazing. $40 million. Like, they're Japan. Why don't they just use chopsticks? Get a couple of homeless people and lower them down there with chopsticks. And modified chopsticks. And another question is, why would he do that? Why wouldn't he put, like, duct tape on it? I don't know. They use it in space, but they can't use it. Wouldn't duct tape work? They can just go down and punch the floor and pull it back up instead of going down. Now they're going to put a camera there so they can find a perfect piece the size of a couple of grams. Like, they're leading you around, like, and treating you as if you're an imbecile. And you shouldn't tolerate it for a second. And there's the only reason we're doing this show tonight. I wasn't going to do a show tonight. And I'm just not, you know, I knew I wanted to do a show, but I didn't think I was going to be able to do a show. But the more I thought about this, the more I realized I have to do the show tonight because I can't wait another day to do this, tell this story. It's too important. Well, if you're not going to use duct tape, why not use a vacuum? Does that make any sense? Am I an idiot for suggesting that? Why don't you just take one of those 4.4 sievert sandbags and drop it down in there, and you can just have like a little fishing net down there, and then the debris will go up in the air, and when it lands, you'll catch it in your little type fishing net with your $40 million robot, and you can, I don't know, what do you think? You think these people are nuts or what? Yeah, so this is the new picture, is it? Wow. Now, we counted the tanks and all the pictures. The most we got, if you count even the small ones, the tiny tanks, was 750. Now, all the experts that come out in the media says it's really dangerous. Nuclear is scary. But if you have a nuclear accident, it's like flying on an airplane, eating potato chips and bananas on a granite countertop, right? A tiny bit, I should just like pop that out each time. Retrieve a tiny bits. Oh, if you're going to retrieve tiny bits, what's the best thing to use? It's not some bizarre, stupid, like, just put chopsticks there so we can all have a good yuck too, right? But why not put duct tape on it? Can duct tape pull up something the size of a grain of rice, or massive, according to this industry, the size of a raisin? Because that's like a mind-blowing. Oh, last time I got it out, the size of a grain of rice. This time we're going to go try to quadruple that. and get something like the size of a raisin. I can't say it with a straight face. Doomsday-like radiation release if a fire in a pull at Unit 4, which is not counted in the meltdown. So the global catastrophe, it already has been, but with Durnford has already happened. We can't do, Reactor 3 blew up. How are you going to dwarf that? Well, actually, it turned out Reactor 4 doesn't even exist. Don't listen to these crazies. Look at your own eyes and tell me if that's the same building. If it's not, then you should support me so I can go to war. Because you won't. I'm talking to the people who've never been here before. And the people that are shocked by the statement that these people are pretending they're on top of a building that doesn't exist. What do you think they're going through? Something so easy to destroy that fable that they're on top of Reactor 4 when you compare the two pictures. Well, it doesn't work. And I created this picture over 10 years ago. I'm like, I got them now, man. I'm going to put this picture out there and I got to kick their ass. Little did I know, I'm an idiot. I'm an idiot to think that. I didn't think it. I hoped it. I dreamt it. In a normal society, this would be like the eureka moment. Like, holy shit, look at this. We got him. That's some fake news right there, Dana boy. Yeah. I know. Tell me about it. The sad thing is, I would wreck this industry in 1 year if I had a big foundation or just a single year with all the stuff I needed to go after and to build a crew and come after this industry, and that would be the end of it. You would have the entire planet would turn on this industry, including their own kids. Their own family members would turn on them if they seen what they had done to 8 million species. A tong. A tong is the scariest thing we've ever created. $40 million robot, man. Show it some respect. So next time, should they put duct tape on that? Maybe they get 2 grains raised the next time. We should call them more. Everybody should call them and say, hey, put duct tape on it. Like, you're not going to use a vacuum cleaner. Put some duct tape on it. So you don't have to keep going back like idiots. You can just come out every 12 months and regurgitate your normal lies. To grip a tiny nugget of radioactive debris, enter the number 2. Like it's so difficult in a fishing rod style. A leading director in Japan, nuclear power generation is the only invention that may destroy the future of human beings, because we have so many idiots in the nuclear industry. The nuclear industry has the most idiots of any industry, the most cowards of any industry, on top of the most chicken necks, as we like to say. At least 880 tons, but they're talking about all reactors, of melted nuclear fuel that was mixed with broken parts of internal structures. So this is the cover story, and they keep introducing this framing narratives, right, to slowly indoctrinate people into, anytime they get into a conversation, this is the stuff they're going to regurgitate. That's what they want to happen, right? At least 880 tons of melted nuclear fuel is mixed with broken parts of internal structures and other debris inside the 3 reactors. Ruined. I don't know, let's look at it now. Does that look ruined to you, or does that look like a nightmare? In 2011, pretending they're on a building that doesn't even exist. They got 70 identical reactors in the United States. And after a series of small missions by robots, such liars, to gather samples, after a series of small missions. So this story is going to keep coming back. Rather than put a vacuum cleaner down there or some duct tape and get all the pieces they need, these people are lunatics, eh? But because they're not trying to appeal to anybody with common sense, right? I like the vacuum idea personally, or I like duct tape, but vacuum's a little bit quicker and easier and dirtier, but you're going to get everything you want. Right? And it can be sealed in that container. You can take that container, put it in another container, put a seal on it, and you can get 4,000 military and police and then drive to Tokyo. And these people are idiots. Experts will determine a large-scale method for removing the melted fuel first at the number 3 reactor. They're going to remove the melted fuel at reactor 3. They're a little bit late for that one. I mean, they picked up 30 million bags. They can get all the little grain-sized pieces they ever dreamt of. We're crushing it tonight, aren't we? Big time. 16 people, holy shit. Wow. On my little show, that's crazy. I got 11 likes already after an hour and 7 minutes. I know, you're jealous. I got 12 volts on my poll. That's incredible. I'm surprised the spammers haven't showed up from TEPCO and done me dirty. We don't do it for views, but we do it because humanity deserves the truth. Even if I'm censored into non-existence, that should tell you something. Experts will determine a large-scale method for removing melted fuel first at the number 3 reactor. Well, here's number 3. There's nothing left. There are little chunks that were blown down into the reactors, but the way they're framing it as if there's fuel there. And so here's the official pictures, left and to the right of reactor 3. So they built this contraption off-site, and then they cleaned up around this with remote-controlled cranes, and they laid that built, by cranes because it was built off-site. It doesn't physically touch the destroyed remains of reactor 3, the stump. And then they claimed there was a fuel pool up there now. Magic. It's like magic when there's only a stump left. So reactor 3, the fuel pools in the reactor cores of all the buildings are identical. Everything about it is identical. Colors, the doors are all in the same place. The light sockets are all in the same place. Everything's identical. Even the idiots that work in each of them are identical. They're clones of other idiots. The buildings don't exist, for goodness sakes. So the plume, not just from reactor 3, but the plume, this is the French government, had 10 million atoms of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air of what it was pre-Fukushima. So nuclear fallout from the nuclear war they had. Oh, yeah, that's right. They call it testing, right? Yeah. So if we do the bomb, call it a test, then the radioactive fallout doesn't matter, does it? It's the same bomb, same radioactive fallout, the war. The Soviet Union's biggest nuclear test was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki bombs going off at the same time. It's like the radioactive fallout of 3,800 Nagasaki's. It blew out windows 700 miles away. The work could take more than a century. Yes, at a size of a grain of rice each time. More than a century. Work begins in Fukushima to collect the fuel debris at the new location. The bums of Japan. They really are just an unlikable industry, isn't it? There she is, guys. Unit 2. It burnt constantly for days. I guess some of that stuff will come up here in a bit for you. Some headlines to give you some better context. We don't really get this pictures very often. It's a rare picture, right? I'm going to save that in my oh shit pile. Telescopic retrieval device / robot / remote control robot / geniuses was inserted into a passageway leading to the containment vessel of number 2 reactor on April the 15th. The retrieval mission, only scumbags like that are allowed to use that word, is expected to take about 12 days to complete to get a piece out of it the size of a gram. So the story is very dramatic, right? Holy shit, it's going to take them 12 days to get this little tiny piece of it. It must be crazy. So imagine if they used a vacuum cleaner. I know that sounds crazy. It's just bizarre thinking. Or even duct tape. There's your $40 million beast. The beast of Fukushima right there, boy. I just gotta find the robot pictures so I can drag it all the way down. So I think it's prudent if people download my stuff now. And keep it on a secure hard drive, because if something happens to me, you know they're going to take down this site, right? And this information deserves to exist. After 3 reactors melted down at the plant, 3 melted down, but not Fukushima number 4. That didn't melt down. With 9 reactor cores, that didn't melt down. Doesn't number 4 deserve some loving from the scumbag, the nuclear industry? Holy shit, I got 12 likes on my video. What's that all about? Somebody new must have came along. Hello. Nice to meet you. What's your name? Good, I got some headlines coming up here now. The sample taken from the number 2 reactor weighed about 0.7 grams. So embarrassing, eh? $40 million, I can make a wood chipper big enough to grind up every nuclear academic on the planet. I bet you, I guarantee you, actually. We can use a vacuum cleaner to clean, wet and dry vacuum each time to clean up the mess that's left. We can feed it to the emaciated whales and birds. An analyst detected uranium, which is contained in nuclear fuel zirconium, which is used for fueling the cladding tubes. Let me do that again. An analyst detected uranium. What? In a nuclear meltdown? How is that even possible? Which is contained in nuclear fuel zirconium, which is used for the fuel cladding tubes. Well, the minute the zirconium is exposed to oxygen, it detonates at 1800 degrees, and that ignites the plutonium uranium pellets. They burn at 9,000. So the biggest byproduct is going to be curium isotopes, and uranium, of course, but This industry got some real sickness going on themselves, haven't they? Japan Times column, as the public, this is Japan Times. The Japan Times, and the column is by the editors, right? Japan Times column, as the public, possibly worldwide, the entire planet, the public, because they see us, the industry sees us as like fleas or something. And they're in a position of, they got so much power, they're drunk with it, they're dangerous, they're reckless. I just want to drink. This is a Neptunium 239 dispersal. Total based on TEPCO's total release evaluation. It doesn't include the buildings that I showed you, by the way. It's 20 days. That's 20 days up there. 21 days. And Neptunium 239 decays in 2.5 days, give or take an hour or two, to plutonium 239. Plutonium 239 is named after the devil. And it killed every animal, the billions of animals. It killed every animal in every experiment. And so the beagle and dogs is one of their favorite ones because they don't bite and they got big noses. And so they'll sniff a single monodispersal inhalation of the plutonium. They'll let them live out their lives sometimes, some of the experiments. Or they'll sacrifice them, which means they'll kill them and cut them open to see where the plutonium ended up. But there was this one experiment with Dr. Raymond Gilmedy from Loveless Respiratory Research Institute in New Mexico, which is actually the United States Navy Research Institute. And they had 144 beagle dogs and beagle puppies. 93 dogs died of skeleton tumors. But they also, at the same time, had liver tumors and lung tumors. And the second most, they all died, by the way, of multiple tumors from a single plutonium. So when you see a plume covering the entire planet, ask yourself, every time you hear of a skeleton tumor, lung tumor, liver tumor, is it possible that this is the catalyst? Because then you're starting to be realistic. Also, Canada's almost 90% of the population is now obese. In the United States, 74% of the population is obese. I went from 165 pounds in 2019. By 2020, I went poof. And my diet is very frugal, right? So this was a thyroid thing, it turns out. Fukushima is the most serious, and of course what does radiation love to attack is the thyroid, so you got mutated hormones. Fukushima is the most serious man-made disaster in human history. And this was 2015. Obesity rates are now nearly double Japan's average. Excessive weight gain after a nuclear crisis is a marker of radiation brain damage. Radiation brain damage. And so let's go back to I just want to call it a plutonium plume, because after 2.5 days it starts decaying to plutonium. This is the plutonium mixed oxide reactor. This was a breeder reactor for plutonium. And see those pillars that are hanging off the building? They're big enough that you can turn a SUV around on them. It might be a 6-point turn or something, but... And this is another shot of reactor 3. This is shortly after the event. There's nothing there. The reactor cores and fuel pools at the very top of the buildings. That the building doesn't exist. So that's non-reactor cores. These are very, very large reactor core. And each one is considered 100 Chernobyls. So 900 Chernobyls. Chernobyl was a graphite. It was a new reactor. It didn't have fuel pools. These are pure uranium, pure plutonium. And they're massive inventories in each reactor core. Right? And they're stored in fuel pools that are boiling off 120,000 liters a day. And the problem is, this stuff goes in the fuel pool because it's creating heat. The heat is created by splitting atoms. The splitting atoms never go away. Energy, by the way, never goes away. And so we have accumulation now for 80 years of emissions directly into the environment from 1,000 fuel pools. And every year there's more going into the fuel pools, so there's more emissions each day. If you're going to try to come up with a weapon that would eventually exterminate all species, it would be a fuel pool of nuclear used fuel. Because you don't need an accident, you don't need an event, you don't need to dump it, you just need fuel pools splitting atoms into the environment to eventually guarantee that no species can survive. Because this stuff never goes away and attacks everything with replicating cells. And nothing, no humans, no insects, no birds, mammals, animals, or anything else, have an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. In the latest attempt, TEPCO plans to collect a sample from a location 1 or 2 meters closer to this 1 or 2 meters closer. So they're trying to pretend the reactor core is still there, right? That's the idea of the story. And they're going to piggyback the ELF system. They're going to piggyback the water releases. They're going to piggyback the sandbags on each of these stories. I'm not going to cover it every single time because there's no need to. In the latest attempt, TEPCO plans to collect a sample from 1 or 2 meters closer to the number 2 reactor vessel than they did in November. We covered this extensively in November. And then they called it a grain of rice. Now they're calling it the size. Not that it really matters, but why? I think because they're humiliated the first time. So why wouldn't you use a vacuum cleaner? Is that crazy talk? Is that crazy talk? Why? Or use duct tape? I like duct tape. Would duct tape work? I don't know. This is a great question, Timmy. Put duct tape on it. Is that silly? Am I just being reckless? No consideration for the brave homeless that are working at this? That's what it is, right? Dan, have some consideration for all the homeless people that are sacrificing their lives to get that grain or that piece the size of a raisin. See, even calling it a raisin, so pathetic, isn't it? So should TEPCO and International Atomic Energy Agency be removed from all nuclear permanently? My apologies, I'm almost there. Okay, that's where I left off, I guess. That was before that. It must be right there. Where did I leave? Yeah, that's it there. Okay. TEPCO will collect the debris from the same location as in the previous work. Debris. How can you call something the size of a grain of rice debris, I wonder? If the retrieval device cannot reach the bottom of the containment vessel due to obstacles, let's just put duct tape all over the top of that thing and just go down and punch the floor and bring it back up. You don't have to go back there anymore. If they were being honest, this is what they would do. But they need to create this drama so they can throw in, right, they can conflate it with other stuff. The remote control device, which is quite the stretch to call it that, which acts like a fishing rod, can extend up to 22 meters. 67, 68 feet or something. Cameras as well as a mental instrument to hold debris are installed at the far end. Cameras. They're going to put cameras into a nuclear meltdown now. They're going to show us that magic camera, I wonder, that can work in that environment. Like, I'd say put... Never mind. Whole debris are installed at the far end. So that's the thing, and they're going to put a camera there. They modified it. Now it's going to have a camera there. Do you need a camera, though? Like, if they want to, they can just use a satellite and shoot down from space right down on top of that and watch this thing, and then an X-ray camera, and then just grab. The whole story is insane. It's all about the industry trying to direct your attention away from reality. To prepare for the second attempt to conduct a training for workers, the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society, to check the order of the pipes in late March. Check the order of the pipes. They talking so much gibberish, like you're kind of forced just to go along with it sometimes. For workers, the retrieval device has also been improved to increase stability when the tip section is lowered. Like a fishing rod. A fishing rod. Right? It's not very... So they're like this. These people should be arrested. They need to stop these crazies from writing these stories. So they stabilized the top of that, did they? This contraption. This $40 million contraption. They stabilized the very top of it, because the top of it is a ram from a hydraulic cylinder. You can't stabilize that. That's as stable as it gets. So like they're trying to paint a picture that makes them look like normal, right? Like people that breathe air and drink water, when they most likely have none of those attributes. To prepare for the second attempt, TIPCO conducted training for workers to check the order of the pipes. I got no idea what that means. I don't care. Container number 2 reactor is no longer sealed to French Nuclear Safety Authority. March the 16th on day 5. Completely beyond comprehension how huge the contamination in the ocean will be. Fukushima radioactive material is also poured into landfills to enter the sea. It's spreading all over the world. Well, the plume models are just... it's undeniable. Robot starts second mission to retrieve debris at the ruined Fukushima Nuclear Plant. So that picture that's their new... They roll that out for the story, right? And get people like, wow, look at all the tanks. The most we counted was 750. Not 1,000. And if you fill up these tanks, you can never get back on the site. So you got reactor up there, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and reactor 5, and reactor 6, which was redacted, and the common spent fuel pool was redacted. And a spot way up in the southeast there was redacted. And pictures that were released in 2021, 736 pictures. And I've done a show dedicated to those pictures. We show every one of them. And other pictures that TEPCO has a few weeks back during the anniversary, March 11th. A remote control robot is worked. So they got all these stories regurgitating the exact same thing with a few people tried to. This one only got a single sentence, right? Remote control robot is embarked on a second mission to retrieve tiny bits. Why not use a vacuum cleaner? A long hose. You can make the hose as long as you want, because you can create an incredible vacuum cleaner with $40 million. You can put it on the end of its sophisticated fishing rod. Fukushima fine-tunes debris cleaning operations. These people should be arrested. Hong Kong. Fukushima fine-tunes debris cleaning operations. None of these stories are any, not even a 1,000 miles close to the reality, right? When the crazies got no checks and balances, they just don't care. They'll just say anything. They don't care. Who's going to hold them accountable? There's no repercussions for being a nuclear degenerate, right? Well, they get bonuses. They get advancements. Japanese engineers, okay, whatever, began on Tuesday a difficult operation to move a second sample. So they want this. So when I show you all of these pictures are the pictures I introduced. None of the pictures like this are from the actual stories. When was the last time stories carried anything remotely close to this stuff? And these pictures here, you'll never find this picture anywhere else. This was a single. They had a number of years back, 2015, I think it was 2016. They screwed up, and there was this very, very high quality shot of the site, and it was a huge file. It was down, like it was just normally you take a picture and you pull it over into your folder when you get a picture. Whenever you see a picture, I always scoop the picture, right? But everything changed after that. After I showed these pictures, you can't for all the mainstream media in Japan. You can no longer download the picture. And so I was able to zoom in and extrapolate all of this stuff from a single picture. And we have to go through that whole folder because there was so much stuff going on. But how come you can't take a piece of debris there? It's still there today, by the way, right? They put covers over it and claimed the building don't exist. So why weren't they worried about getting a sample of this building? Why was it Unit 2, but not Unit 3, not Unit 4, not Unit 1? Why was Unit 2? Because it's the only building that looks like it's intact. And that's the idea is they're not going to show you this picture and talk about Unit 2, right? Because you're not going to be worried about Unit 2 the minute you lay eyes on that. And at the top of the buildings were 4 decades of reactor cores, around 8 reactor cores. And the reactor core itself in Reactor 3, which is Reactor 3, was a plutonium mixed oxide reactor core. That's long. We have contaminated the entire planet with anthropogenic man-made radioactive fallout. Hi, everybody. Awesome. You guys are awesome. The first child removal operation is a specially developed extendable device. A specially developed extendable device. In November, we covered it extensively. Well, we came out and laughed at it because it's so absurd. That their $40 million robot, went down and just very, very, very carefully, it took like 12, 14 days to slowly put their fishing line down and get a little piece the size of a grain of rice and slowly, carefully bring it back all the way up. Why not put some duct tape on it? Just reel it up. Come on, baby. Now they changed it to the equivalent of one raisin. All the stories that in November we covered it were the size of a grain of rice. Everybody said those words. Everybody. Even Raphael Grossi came out. It's the size of a grain of rice. You leave us alone, you anti-nuclear. Can you imagine Raphael Grossi doing something like that? I can't. In fact, you don't need to go in a reactor. They can get all they want off the top of the turbine buildings. All the little grains of rice size debris they ever wanted. They cemented the harbour of the site because fuel assemblies landed out there. That hole was created by a fuel assembly. They can go down there and get a grain the the size of a grain of rice or a raisin. It's absurd. But like they can just use a vacuum cleaner, right? You can use a vacuum cleaner on top of the building so and get their grain. They're still there. Like to be honest now, they did lay a sheet of steel with a crane on top of that. They're not going to go up there. None of that is removed. All of that is still there. You're not going up there, but a human's not going to survive anywhere. 3 of the Fukushima's reactors, 6 reactors, went into meltdown. So 0 prominence. Like 0. That's what the industry does, right? But they're saying reactor 4 over there is perfect. That's reactor 3. And then they gutted them with remote controlled cranes and a couple of 100 homeless people sacrificed. And they incinerated the bodies of the homeless, of course, and gave the urines to a monk, a Buddhist monk or something. There's around 800 of them or something in 2015, 2016. So they're saying reactor 4 is perfectly fine. That should terrify you that they're doing that. Last month's robots began moving sandbags, blah, blah, blah. So that they're piggybacking that story and the dumping in the ocean. And it was supported by the degenerate International Atomic Energy Agency. And we got a poll tonight asking that question: should TEPCO and United Nations International Atomic Energy Agency and UNSCLEAR and ERPA and the IPRC, etc., be removed from Fukushima entire site and the nuclear industry permanently? That's the only hope we got. Like if I had the money, I don't know, blah, 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 blah. You know those big wrecking balls? The next time they got a couple of 100 of these scumbags gathered up, you drive up with your wrecking ball and you smack that building as many times as you can. With remote control, of course, right? From the other side of the planet. In Japan, 2023, Japan began releasing into the Pacific Ocean. These people are insane, eh? It hasn't stopped going into the ocean. They can't contain it. Nothing is put into tanks. Tanks were built. And if you go into my playlist and watch the videos on the tanks with all the documentation, you'll appreciate the enormity of that equation, right? How about here? Why don't they get their samples there? Death ashes. Some of that's way bigger than the size of a grain of rice or a raisin. All of the ash, what they're talking about, is that attribute. Dispersed everywhere after Fukushima releases. Hot particles attached to the clothes. They got all these abandoned buildings and homes in the communities, all 300 square kilometers. They get their samples out of that rather than going to Fukushima. Hot particles attaches to the clothes. Media is brainwashed the public. Nuclear engineers. A huge spray of radioactive material from the plant contained everything, right? Contained plutonium. All they could find is cesium because that's the lie they've been telling you for 80 years. TEPCO made Fukushima plant to a machine for generating radioactive particulate water. Runoff from the molten atomic cores are now in the groundwater in the ocean. So when they say 880 tons of hazardous material is inside the site, they're talking about the entire, everything is there. But when you look at each reactor holds 3,450 spent fuel assemblies, which each assembly is 1,800 pounds, 6.2 million pounds. Most likely a lot more than that because they don't have a repository. That's where they keep the 4 decades of reactor cores. So if you divide that by 2,200 pounds, which is a ton, a metric ton in Japan, that's 2,800 metric tons in each building. So let's just round it off at 3,000. So that's 12,000 tons versus their version. Now there might be 880 tons left, but most of that is gone because everything else burnt off. But that would have radiated everything it touches. So whatever's there has gone deep into the earth. So there's maybe 50 tons left in the buildings that sprayed around, right? Second debris removal trial starts at the Fukushima plant. Again, right, they're pumping that narrative, and they have for a long time, that particular narrative. That's their official number, but it's not the real number, or even close to it, of what the inventory is worth, see? They're suggesting with those numbers that that's the entire inventory, that's all they had. Right, they're not acknowledging anything you're seeing. All the documentation you see tonight, they're refusing to acknowledge that exists. The second trial extraction operation was started using a specially developed extendable device in November, after the first trial in November. When I put duct tape on that, heck, can't hurt, can it? Can that hurt? When I strap a vacuum hose, a 100-foot long vacuum hose, and when you pull it back, right, after, you're going to have tons of debris. You never got to go do this routine ever again. Is that why I only got 15 viewers and 15 likes on my video? Because that makes sense? Is that why? I can guarantee you that's why. The sample weighing just below 0.7 grams, the equivalent of one raisin. This industry, this is all show and tell. There's no reality in anything they tell you. It's about structure. It's about social engineering. These stories are in increments over the next 100 years. They're going to be doing this narrative. Equivalent to about one raisin. Of course, the official story was it was equal to a grain of rice. So how did we go from a grain of rice to the size of one raisin? Not that doesn't matter. But there was something subconsciously where they made a decision to use the term one raisin. Because everybody goes, I'm not going to write that one grain, that is a grain of rice anymore. I'm not doing that. I'm not writing that story no more. You got to give me something better, because people are going to just laugh at us. Look what Durnford done. He laughed at us for weeks and weeks. We made fun of that every time the subject came up since November. Was delivered to a research lab near Tokyo. And it was done secretly. There was a police and military escort. There was drones and there was helicopters. There was all the roads were blocked on the way, and they just drove through every intersection because they were blocked by police, and this was very secretive. And right, so they built this whole mystique around it that didn't warrant it at all. Kilograms of soil in Tokyo is more radioactive than the stuff that they picked out. But I can't help but wonder why they didn't use a vacuum cleaner to bring up debris, or even duct tape. They go down there and they got to find this piece, and they were doing it just blind. They were dropping it down and bring it up. Look, no, not now. Let's do it again. Because they're social engineering the population that lull them into this complacency that are still, because it's very difficult. Like if you don't know nothing about nuclear and you're just out reading these stories, you are hopelessly lost. You are never, ever gonna. Unfortunately, and it's horrifying to say that, right? That's one of the reasons we exist. Like originally, when this happened, I did cover it right that day and forever after. But I remember because I read the comments a lot, right? And everybody was saying, "Why don't somebody do something? Why don't where's the honest person out there? Why doesn't somebody tell the truth? This is lies and everything." I was reading that, and people, you can see that there was a lot of people that were hurt, that were scared, and I was too, right? And I'll never forget, that experience of the helplessness, because you're going to the experts and they were telling you bananas, potato chips, and walking in sunshine and flying on airplanes routines, and I don't have any tolerance for that stuff whatsoever. Zero. I'm not going to tolerate it. I'm a good person. I'm not going to tolerate that stuff. And I said, you know what? I can't remember the exact comment, but I read this one comment, and I said, I'll do it. And I came out swinging the first couple of years. They stopped using the word banana for about a decade after I came out swinging. Anybody used a banana, I came out and I said pretty wild stuff. And people felt better, and that was a good thing, I think. But unfortunately, the research expeditions, and people used to beg me to come back from the research expeditions, but I knew we might never, we've done 6 years, 4 to 5 months a year research expeditions without coming home off the ocean. We being me, on the ocean by myself. Not the first year. The first year I still wasn't healthy enough. I had a crew, and they were just burning through all the resources we can find, and not really, they didn't understand nuclear. They didn't appreciate, if they found a starfish, that was magic to them, when there should have been, 7 million starfish around that island. They find one, they thought it was a big deal, but it wasn't. And you couldn't fund that operation any longer. We tried, right? I had to turn around and do it myself. And I was like, I'm never going to forgive the nuclear industry for forcing me to go out there myself, because, I had a debilitating injury from diving as a commercial diver. But I had a connection with the species because I worked with them 6 hours a day on the ocean floor. And so when I went out myself and seen it, because they used to come back with the cameras and I would upload the pictures. I wasn't out there. I didn't think my body could handle it, and I couldn't. And so when I finally started going out there, I was still in a wheelchair. I was still on sticks, right? And then years later, probably 4 years later or something, because I was getting stronger each year, and 10 years in a hospital bed, and I was learning to walk, right? But I desperately needed my sticks to do anything. And so one day I got off the Zodiac onto the beach, and got my sticks. You always got your sticks there, and you put one leg over the side of the boat, and then your stick would come over and it goes over the bow, the little Zodiac, right? Zoe would always do a face dive off the bow of the boat. Bless her heart. And then one day, I didn't take my sticks, and I was like 20 feet away from the boat, and I was taking pictures, and I zoomed around, and I said, well, I'll take a picture of the Zodiac, because I had the side of the Zodiac, and in my frame was my sticks, 2 of my sticks, and I panicked. I sat down right there on the spot. I didn't think I could make it back to the boat. And, wow, like I just walked 20 feet away from the boat. That really blew my mind. And so I had to stand up now, because I hadn't done that trick before, standing up without no support. And so I stood up, and I went back to my boat, and I got a stick. And so I took one stick just to be safe. But I had this big, stupid smile on my face that, wow, right? I can do a little bit on my own. That was like a moment for my life. It changed my life. It changed my bum life. They're bumming around on the ocean 4 to 5 months a year looking for the species. Man, I still have nightmares. 3 of the Fukushima 6 reactors went into meltdown. And no pictures. If I don't show you pictures, you're not going to see. You have no context. I'm going to bring a picture, and they're not going to show you any of this. They're going to tell you this story, but they're not going to put pictures there, because then their story doesn't work, right? Then the cover story, the idiot story. Last month, robots began moving sandbags that were used to absorb radiation-contaminated water, right? So they're piggybacking. It's almost as if they're going to use the so-called raisin expeditions to piggyback other stories. So this is going to keep popping up when they need to try to artificially inflate one of the cover stories, right? Because that's what that is. They cemented them in. They put... why would you try to take them out of it? We don't see any documentation of it. We don't see any containers that they were using. We don't see the workers in their paper suits. Nothing. Nothing. And the same thing with the dumping in the ocean. The dumping in the ocean never stopped. And there is no treated wastewater. It's absurd. Which was endorsed by the degenerate agency, the UN's little butt plug. Each reactor's top fuel pools holds 3,450 fuel rod assemblies. The common spent fuel pools, which was Peon Reactor 4 on the same street, so the tsunami would have ran straight through that too, holds 6,291 fuel rod assemblies. So if the official numbers, and let's do the calculator thing on this. Let's actually, because we don't really do that numbers too often, let's bring the numbers up. Oh shit. My computer went to sleepy land on me because I didn't want to plug it in because I'm afraid I got so much stuff plugged into my shitty extension cords that I'm afraid I'm going to crash the system, but now I got no choice. So what I'm doing, I'm going to go get the plug it in, fire the computer back up because I can't turn the show off. Can't read the comments and blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to play a song for a little bit, Dr. Sternglass, which this guy was the first person to quantify radioactive fallout health effects, and showed well over 300,000 children died in the United States alone from radioactive fallout from the nuclear weapons testing. But anyway, James Lucid had put together a pretty amazing song. We're going to play that right now, and I'll be back in about a minute and a half, 2 minutes. I'll be back before the song's over. It's unfortunate, but I still have to plug in an external computer. I got to run another little extension cord to make that work. I'll be right back. Here we go.
Dr. Sternglass knew the risk. A silent war, invisible twist. From the fallout clouds to the gamma rays, he saw the truth in a poisoned haze. They laughed him off, they turned away, but the radiation never fades away. Dr. Sternglass, can you hear us now? We ignored the warnings, don't know how. We breathe it in, it's in the breeze. The slow decay brings us to our knees. In the quiet towns where secrets seep, the silent burn beneath our feet. Sternglass warned as the world moved on, but in the ground the danger's drawn. The truth he spoke, buried deep, as fallout spreads while the children sleeps away. Dr. Sternglass, can you hear us now? We ignored the warnings, don't know how. We breathe it in, it's in the breeze. The slow decay brings us to our knees. From Chernobyl's dust to Fukushima's tide, he showed
Make your
the path
computer easier
where
to use.
sickness hides.
On screen.
The rivers glow, the soil turned black, but the suits keep pushing, won't look back. The numbers grow, the cancer spreads, the media shrugs the science dead. You can't feel it, can't see the burn, but Sternglass knew it's our turn. Radiation crawling through the land, while they The winds have carried our poisoned fate. Babies born to a world unknown. Toxic dust in the blood and bone. You told the truth, but no one stayed to listen to the mess they made. The fallout's here.
Okay, here we go again.
You built a future fueled by death. The stern glass green, the warning clear.
I absolutely love that song, man. That's called Dr. Sternglass. You'll find it at James Lucid's site on YouTube. I had it a little too high. I noticed too late, unfortunately. So I'll just set the volume so the next time I don't... Because I'll listen to it when I'm working sometimes, so... When you get the headphones on, it might get a little loud, and I don't mind to put yourself right, but I'm sure everybody managed to make it through it. So we're going to do the math on that. And then the computer went sleepy time. And so it's... Each reactor core had 3,450 fuel assemblies. So times 4. And then the common spent fuel pool had 6,291 fuel assemblies. Yeah, 6291. So plus 6291. There's 1, 2. There's 20 million tons, or 20,000 tons. Sorry, 20,000 assemblies that are 1,800 pounds each. The fuel rods are 12 feet and they weigh 18 pounds. So 100 fuel assemblies in each. Times 1,800. That's 36 million pounds. And divide that. But number 6, we believe, because it was redacted on the pictures that were released in 2021 from the original pictures by a very, very high quality drone for those days. So divide it by 2,200 pounds to get the tons. Is 16,000 tons, 16,400 tons. So they say there's only 800 tons there and 900 tons there, and they're probably right. The rest of it was released. The rest of it was released into the environment. In the form of a massive radioactive plumes. Just massive. Well, we're doing pretty good tonight. We got a whole show on tonight, didn't we? So that's Fukushima plume covering the entire planet in 23 days. So be very careful of believing anything the nuclear industry tells you, particularly when they don't back it up. New York Times ejection of nuclear material. Confidential United States documents suggest pieces of the fuel blown up to a mile away. So they didn't have to go in reactor 2 to get samples. They can go a mile away and get it, according to this story. Some between 2 units were bulldozed over. It was over 1 million sieverts outside of reactor 1. See, 4 sieverts is a lethal dose to any human. 10 will drop an elephant. Like a sniper round. Plutonium likely ejected from the fuel pools during the explosions up to several miles from the reactor. So you don't just go a mile. You can go several miles and get your samples. Broken pieces of the nuclear fuel rod found outside of reactor number 2, covered up by the bulldozers. Extremely radioactive material continues to ooze out of the number 2 reactor vessel. Leak is likely to widen. Calling it a leak, I really disrespect that word. Damage at Unit 2 is what prompted TEPCO to discuss evacuation of Fukushima workers. Perhaps because the reactor burned continuously for several days, as the Nuclear Regulatory Commission admits. So their robot, with their tongue, is the cover story for what's really happened. TEPCO says the increase of radioactive releases from workers going in and out of Unit 2. TEPCO said. That's why TEPCO should be removed from the site, right? Should TEPCO and the degenerate, disgusting, cowardly United Nations, International Atomic Energy Agency, Unclear, ERPA, the IPRC, be removed from Fukushima entire site and the nuclear industry permanently? Yes. Well, why not? Why wouldn't you get people that are actually good humans, that know what they're doing, to go to work on this stupid disaster they created? 7-fold increase in radioactive cesium, not counting uranium, plutonium, americium, neptunium, strontium, everything else, being released from number 2 reactor during April 2012. That's the following year. 7-fold increase. No, it's like a banana, Dana. Stop it. Report new TEPCO data unequivocally shows ongoing criticality at Unit 2. Of course it did, burnt constantly for days. But the evidence of this is, you have to provide it so people can say, well, it's not just Dana saying this, right? U.S. government experts think melted fuel rods landed in the water under number 2, causing steam explosions. Yeah, well, we know it blew up, big time. Pressure dropped dramatically at the same time, clear indication primary containment was lost. A cover-up of a massive explosion of Fukushima Reactor 3 fueled with plutonium. United States government's worst-case scenario, likely a reality. The entire nuclear core was ejected into the environment. It seems blast wasn't from hydrogen exploding vortex. That's the blast, right? They ejected the reactor core and the fuel pools right out of the buildings. Explosion vortexes suggest a steam explosion where the fuel got it, boiled off all the water in the containment ripped itself apart, and then when it was reintroduced in the water explodes like a dynamite, right? Because the temperatures. Potential global catastrophe from Fukushima Unit 2 highly radioactive fuel. What's alongside of Reactor 2? On one side is Reactor 1 blowing up, and on the other side is Reactor 3 and 4 blew up. But Reactor 2 is the only, when you go looking up Reactor 2 to see what that nightmare actually looks like, you get this picture coming up. So when you look up Reactor 2, you see that. And because you're looking for Reactor 2, that's what you see, but you don't see Reactor 3, you don't see Reactor 4. It's meant to disenfranchise you from what's going on in the facts, to keep your senses, which has been endorsed by the International Atomic Energy Agency. Well, but they're not a regulatory agency. They don't got any authority. They're literally the devil. That's who these people are. All right. TEPCO 2013. TEPCO sent the press release announcing their plan to attempt to operate the Alps by the end of September. But this was July the 1st. This is February 11th. They're just starting to build the Alps system in 2011. That's the Alps decontamination system under construction in February 2011. TEPCO chose not to stop the water leaks, the massive flood in 2011 over fears their stock prices would crush. They were already crushed, right? because investment markets considered the company bankrupt. It was bankrupt. I only got 4 more to go through, so I might as well click on them. So August 9th, 2014, move ahead a year, over a year. The disaster site has struggled with water decontamination for years and just announced recently that they think they finally have the decontamination system operational. 2015. So 4 years, over 4.5 years later, they have the ELP system. So how could you decontaminate water? A massive, normally the reactors need 4,500 tons a minute. So think of 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks driving past your house every minute. And the water they were putting in there, they said, was about 140 tons a day, which is equal to a garden hose, a 3/8-inch garden hose at anybody's houses, at 30 pounds per square inch, split 4 ways, spraying on 4 reactors. Do you really think pissing on that reactor is going to help? Because that's what the stream we're talking about. Well, there we go, we made it through. All right, that's it for tonight. James got a new song out, which means he's a little bit closer to 300 songs. It's awesome, eh? We should throw a party when he gets 300 songs. For his 300th song, I think we should have a very special show. All right, let me get this sorted out. Nuclear Industry Holla. Hold on, I can't read it. I haven't got the screen up. Wow. What have I got here? I got 21 likes tonight. Amazing. Should TEPCO and UN and every other nuclear agency be removed from Fukushima's entire site permanently? And the nuclear industry, they're literally a curse on humanity. You got 3 minutes, 2 minutes, and 30 seconds to get another vote in. And this is James Lucett's site. You hear me mention it every show, I'm sure. All right, so I got the audio turned off for YouTube on my side, so that I can reset that and check to make sure it's in 1080. Looks like it is. And hopefully we're back again tomorrow night. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. We'll see you on the next show. Take care.
Yeah. Corium Records. This the street version. No paper suits, no clipboards, just fallout. How you run that?
Nuclear industry holler.
Push that core back.
DOE don't bother.
Sell that fallout.
IAA shot callers.
Got that badge on.
Redacted for the dollar.
Hand for Diablo. Peek and Fermi. You built the war. We don't forget the cities. Bonus checks for blood spots. Clocked out with the core hot. Crew got burned, no foul pass. Sit tight, just fake the blast. Ain't no siren when rods crack. Just a memo and a soft stat. My cousin dropped, no coverage. Must be stressed, fuck that. Clean up crew with no boots. Stacking these stoppers in black suits. IAEA said no leak, then why he hooked to a chemo suite? How you run that?
Nuclear industry holler.
Push that core back.
DOE don't bother.
Sell that fallout.
IEA shot collars.
Got that badge on.
Redacted for the dollar.
Sellafield saying on no thriller, saw Paducah. Y'all filed the numbers, but the dough still blew up.
Pipes hissing past midnight. Truck move clean out of oversight. Suits laughing in the deacon zone. Left the smear on my mother's stone. Flip the switch, ran the feed. Spiked high, scrub from the reed. Badges flagged, lab went mute. Routine test with a doctor root. DOE still ducking. City lines looking real corrupted. Picked on breathing like it's wrong, but y'all just packed it up and gone.
Head grit,
No talk back.
Diablo,
Coast crack.
Fermi,
Dose rise.
Gadoka,
Lit up in disguise.
Santa Nova,
Full cooking.
Oak Ridge.
Half-life. Full crooking. Corium burn up. Paperwork clean. This is fallout on the beat unseen.
how you run that?
Nuclear industry holler.
Push that core back.
DOE don't bother.
Sell that fallout.
IEA shot collars.
Got that badge on.
Redacted for the dollar.
We don't play that.
Now make 'em holler.
Corium fam just turned up proper. We got the list.
We got the sound.
We make that truth beat underground.
Holy shit, the graphics were amazing, eh?